So welcome. It's lovely to see all of you here tonight, and thank you for joining us. My name is Nikki Lefebvre, and I am the director of the Natick Historical Society. We were established in 1870, and today we remain an independent nonprofit that receives no public funds. We thrive on the support of our community members, and so I want to extend my thanks to all of our supporters who make programs like these possible. Thank you all very much. And we are thrilled tonight to have the second installment in our new virtual series called Meet Our Neighbors. And our guest tonight is Colonel Frank Moore of the Natick Soldier Systems Center. Our goal in this series is really to shine a light on the many cultural, educational, service, and other organizations that have shaped Natick over time in the past, in the present, and will continue to shape Natick into the future. So next up in the Meet Our Neighbors series, we will have Athena Pandolf of the Natick Center Cultural District, and that event will be on Wednesday, May 26th at 7 p.m. And the series, the Meet Our Neighbors series, will continue with a new slate of guests next fall. So please stay tuned to find out who our new organizations will be. I also want to note that next week on Tuesday, May 4th at 7 o'clock, we'll be hosting a talk titled 10,000 Digital Absurdities, the Power of Needlework in 19th Century America. And that's with needlework scholar Mariah Gruner, also on Zoom. So you can learn more about these events and many others coming up on our website, and that's www.natickhistoricalsociety.org. Colonel Frank Moore currently serves as the U.S. Army Devcom Soldier Systems Center Military Deputy, the U.S. Army Devcom Soldier Center Military Deputy at the Natick Soldier Systems Center. Colonel Moore's Army career began in 1995 when he was commissioned as a second lieutenant upon graduating from Worcester Polytechnic Institute here in Massachusetts, where he studied mechanical engineering. He also holds a Master's of Business Administration from the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Colonel Moore has participated in multiple U.S. Army operations overseas, including Operation Southern Watch in Qatar in 1997, Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq in 2003, and then again in 2009. He served in several leadership roles as an air defense artillery officer, both in South Korea and at Fort Bliss, Texas. Later, as an acquisitions officer, he worked at the Army Research Laboratory, Missile Defense Agency, and Special Operations Command. Since 2015, Colonel Moore has been working at the Natick Soldier Systems Center, and he plans to retire this fall. For his service in the Army, Colonel Moore has earned many awards, including the Bronze Star, 2 Defense Meritorious Service Medals, and 3 Army Commendation Medals. He currently lives in Walpole with his wife, Gloria, and their 4 children. A warm welcome to our guest, Colonel Frank Moore. Please give him your warmest, though silent, Zoom round of applause. We couldn't be more delighted to have you. And with that, Frank, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Nikki. Really appreciate that warm welcome. And just, yeah, good evening to everyone. I actually stayed in uniform to play the part as a Army colonel this evening. So one piece also in the intro, we're actually talking it with the committee before we get started is actually I'm also from New England. I grew up in Skowhegan, Maine. Most of you probably haven't heard of it unless you were going up to Sugarloaf to go skiing or going up to the Forks to do whitewater rafting. You might have drove through it, but so because, you know, being from New England, when I went into the Army, you know, after a tour or two, I think it's pretty typical. You kind of look for an assignment or an installation that will get you a little bit closer to home. So that's tough for someone from New England, right? So when I started looking around, you know, I found Natick Labs, So every time I transitioned, went to a new duty station, I always looked at Natick Labs and tried to get an assignment up there, asking, "Hey, what is this Natick Labs?" And then, after 20 years of service, I finally got lucky enough to get assigned to Natick Labs, and it's really a unique place, unlike any other installation in the Army. So I'm happy to be here this evening to kind of explain to you some of the, what makes it unique, and what I've kind of learned after being there, believe it or not, 6 years, which is eternity for active duty Army, to be in one location for 6 years. So again, as I go through this, I am gonna, try to avoid some of the jargon, but excuse me if I do. It's very hard. We have very many acronyms in the Army, but I'll do my best. This is a little different audience than I'm used to. Also, start with a little bit of history, given the audience here on Natick Labs. So Natick Labs was built back in, I believe Congress approved its building back in 1951, and why did they choose Natick? Part of it's like why the country chooses any type location like that. And, it was congressional influence. Massachusetts had pretty strong congressional influence back then. But it was also obviously for the academics. You read books, they consider Natick a, Boston suburb. I've never really thought of it, but, part of choosing it was obviously all the great universities there in Boston, but also some of the, innovation and all the research by companies happening in New England. That was a big part of the choice. And when it first started, it was actually called U.S. Army Quartermaster Research and Development. I don't know, if you have some military history buffs, you're probably familiar with the Army Quartermaster, but, they're all about supplying the Army, right? And that's everything from, parachutes out of a plane to the food we eat, culinary arts, mortuary affairs, all the logistics, getting water, petroleum on the battlefield, field service, how do you wash and clean uniforms out in the field environment, sanitation, all of that falls under the Army Quartermaster Corps. And also, uniforms and individual equipment, that's all quartermaster. So prior to 1950s, all that research and development was really done, maybe 3 or 4. I know Philadelphia was one of the locations across the country, and they really thought, the synergy of all those activities being in one location in Natick made a lot of sense. So again, in 1952, I think just a year after they started building it and they started occupying the first building headquarters as early as 1953. If my memory serves me, I believe it only cost $11 million to build that first installation with the buildings. And as you'll see later in the brief, we're building one building now, one research facility there that's costing us $50 million. So, things have definitely went up over the years. I also, while we're on the history, wanted to show you a book that was provided to me recently. And we can, if anyone's interested in this, we can get the ISBN out on it. It's published by Acadia Publishing, but yeah, U.S. Army Natick Laboratories, The Science Behind the Soldier. There was also one particular picture in here I wanted to show that kind of highlights. I don't know if you can kind of see that. but that's the front gate, going in to the installation when it was first built back in 1952. And as you can see, the quartermaster research and development was the first name of the installation. Unfortunately, we like changing the names a lot in the Army, and I apologize for that. You'll hear a few different names. Natick Soldier Systems Center, that is actually the name for the actual installation. And I have 2 slides up front that talk about the installation. But then the organization that I belong to is Soldier Center, which also shares that name with Natick Labs. But for all of you, Natick Labs is fine. That's what the community still knows us as. I wish we never would have changed the name. I like Natick Labs as the name, and so it's fine to still use that. Okay, so again, the name of the installation is Natick Soldier Systems Center. And as mentioned before, it's the only active Army installation in New England. As many of you probably know, we used to have Fort Devens, right? That had a special forces group up there, but sometime actually while I was in college, I believe that closed down and transitioned to just a National Guard installation, leaving just Natick as, again, the only active duty here in New England for the Army. We do have a senior commander, general. Right now, that's Brigadier General Beeline, though he's retiring this summer also. So we're going to be changing out, a lot of leadership changing out this summer. We have 15 organizations, different ones that work there at Natick. Next slide, I'll talk about those. Actually, all branches of the services are represented in some way there at Natick, and you'll see that. We have approximately 1,500 employees. I think you all can see my cursor here, down here, but as you can see, of those 1,500, a very small percentage of those are actually active duty military. I believe it's roughly 90. And we are a highly educated workforce for sure. 1,231 degrees. Wow. So, oh yeah, location also. Some of you probably don't even know where we're located because we're not that big. And if you weren't looking for us, you probably wouldn't find us. We're Route 27, just south of Route 9. So as you're going up 27 to Route 9, we're right there on the left, right off, that's Lake Chichituit, I believe, is the name. I hope I get that one right. And we're right off, now the name of the street is General Green Avenue. And there's a little history there. I don't know, I think it was back in 2014, 2015. General Green died in combat over in Afghanistan, and he used to be the senior commander there at Natick back, I believe, around 2010. Really a great guy, very beloved by Natick and everything. And actually, that was the highest ranking officer that's died in combat in the Army ever since the Vietnam War. So it really was a big deal. So we dedicated the name of that street, and you'll see a little memorial for him too on the left as you drive in. So,
Frank, before you go on, this is Nikki, just a quick clarifying question. Can you explain what Devcom DCG stands for?
Yeah, thank you. So we'll get to the Devcom part. It's an acronym for Developmental Command, and that's my higher headquarters. And I have a chart on that. And DCG is Deputy Commanding General. So like a lot of generals, he's dual-hatted, right? So he's the Deputy Commanding General to my higher headquarters at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. but he's also the senior commander here at Natick. And that's been very important that the Army maintain a general officer, active duty general officer in New England. So there's been, talks and consideration of that billet, being down at the headquarters in Maryland, but, there's been a lot of congressional support for maintaining, having an active duty general here. Thank you. Again, I talked about those 15 tenants. That's what you see here. And just top to bottom, just a little 101 and kind of DoD acquisitions. That's really what we do. And acquisitions are really all about the development, procurement, and sustainment of weapon systems for the Army. So up top, basically, you have the organizations that we call science and technology or research and technology. And I belong to the Devcom Soldier Center up here in the upper right. We work very closely with USARIUM. You can read the acronym there. They're focused on environmental medicine. That actually is a normal Army command. They have a 06 Colonel commander there, and we work very closely with them on a lot of the human performance and how soldiers are going to react in very cold environments or hot environments, how they react to food, supplements, diseases, all of that is done there. A very impressive organization there. As mentioned, we've got elements of the Navy there, U.S. Coast Guard over to the right. Those are all research organizations. Next row lower is what we call product managers in the Army. So up top, a lot of our job is to do basic research and applied research, and we'll do maybe an early prototype of some type of a system, and then we'll transition it to Army product managers. They further do, more advanced prototyping and further development of that. And then they actually test the equipment, and then they have production contracts, and then they field that out to active duty Army units. And again, all these PM units here all do that type of nature. And then down at the bottom is our sustainment. Once we field a piece of equipment out to an Army user, we have people like the TACOM LCMC that actually are responsible for the life cycle support of the equipment, because a lot of stuff we field out there might have a 20-30 year lifespan to it. So the organizations down at the bottom are in charge of kind of maintaining and upgrading that system during its life cycle. And sometimes, some of the stuff we still have out there, like our mobile kitchens and stuff, are 40 years old. So, and again, more in the PM, as you look at, a lot of these names and the titles here, you'll see clothing comes up a lot. A lot of our partners, both in the Navy, the Marines, really are focused on, clothing and individual equipment. That really is, a core of what all the different tenants there at Natick do. Also textiles, very strong history with textiles, as is Massachusetts. So good fit there. Sustainment, that goes back to our core master roots. So you'll see most of these tenants tied to some piece of, sustainment, clothing, protection, individual equipment. Okay, again, now focusing on who I work for, and again, Devcom Soldier Center. We have approximately 900 employees. So of the 1,500 at Natick, we're probably about half the workforce, because 84 of those employees. A few years ago, we picked up a subordinate organization down in Orlando, Florida, which is always nice in January or February to have a subordinate organization you can go visit down in Orlando. So they were very welcome. Now they do a lot of the simulation and training technology for the Army. So again, the core of what we do there at the Soldier Center, you'll see a lot of the other centers are focused on specific technology like communications or tactical vehicles. Our core mission is the soldier platform. Everything that goes on a soldier, what they wear, the human performance, the sustainment of the soldier. That is what makes us the Soldier Center.
Frank, excuse me, this is Nikki again.
Yeah.
If you go back to the previous slide,
Sure.
Excuse me, there's that beautiful aerial view. And I had a question about whether you would be able to orient us as to where this is exactly, maybe in relation to Natick Center or Route 27 or some other landmarks.
Yeah, actually, I think that would be helpful. If you can see my cursor, I think, on the other side of this lake, 27's kind of coming up in this direction. General Green Ave coming in would be this way. Yeah, that's the housing. Actually, we have military housing too. It's not on the installation proper, but right across the street outside the gate. But this is the General Green Avenue. The front gate coming in here, and you come in, and this is the headquarters building where the front office and the general sit here. And I work over in this location here. And Route 9 would be up here somewhere. Does that help? Good. Yeah, so I won't spend much time here, but Developmental Command, General George, he's our commanding general. That's our higher headquarters. They're both based out of Aberdeen, Maryland. And they're basically the science and technology organization for the entire Army. They execute approximately 90% of the Army's science and technology budget, which is billions and billions of dollars a year. This organization is like 20,000 folks. I believe it's 14,000 Department of the Army civilian with all these different labs down here at the bottom. And you can get a feel at, as I said, a lot of the other, I call them labs, they're called centers now. But, some are focused on aviation here, armaments down at Aberdeen, biological center, that's at Aberdeen. So these are all our sister centers, and this is us here, Devcom Soldier Center. And again, we talked about General Beeline being also the DCG to General George, but also being the senior commander up here at Natick. Okay, and then to our organization, again, I won't spend much time on this one either. This is me over here, military deputy. I work directly for Mr. Tamilio. He's what we call an SES in the Army DOD Senior Executive Service. He gets his own flag, just like a general. So, they're really on par with a general, just a civilian equivalent of that. So down here at the bottom, this is where all the work's done. These are our three main directorate, and we kind of break our work up, as you can see here: protection, sustainment, and soldier effectiveness. Okay, this is a very busy chart. I realize this, and I'm not going to try to really explain it, but I think it's worth mentioning that a few years ago, the Army realized, they were trying to do too much and said, to meet this next generation of near peer threats, we really need to focus our research and development in some specific areas to make us competitive on that future battlefield. And that's what you see over here on the left. Those are kind of the main priorities the Army came up with. And now we've really organized all our organization and our resourcing against these main priorities. And the Soldier Center leads the priority of soldier lethality. How do we make that close combat soldier or even Marine, more effective, more lethal on the battlefield? That was one of the main priorities. And then kind of subordinate to that is, how do we develop a synthetic training environment so soldiers don't have to actually be out in the field to train? How can they take advantage of so much virtual training technology that's out there? And again, that's mainly our Orlando partners that are focused on that side of it. Okay, so this really is kind of the core of what we do, and basically how we see ourselves at Natick. How do we kind of divide the nature of the work being done there? So I'll talk through each one of these, kind of go from the left over to the right. First one's aerial delivery. And I shouldn't have favorites, but of all the work we do at Natick, that definitely is. It's just, parachutes coming out of planes, right? Just inherently, that just lends itself to a lot of research, development. There's a lot of science behind getting a parachute to come out of the plane, whether that's personnel jumping or cargo coming out of the plane, and getting it to a specific location on the ground. We've been doing that for a long time, as many of you know, right? Cargo parachutes coming out of airplanes aren't new, but some of the new stuff we do is called precision aerial delivery. So the cargo and the parachute extracted out of the back of the plane, and the system itself actually is GPS enabled, and it actually steers the parachute through actuators and guides the cargo to a very specific location on the ground, up to many kilometers away from where the plane dropped it from. Just because it drops at such high altitude, the glide ratio, it can be many kilometers away. So just very interesting there. And a new project we're working there in aerial delivery is actually glider technology. And again, for some of the history buffs there, you know that is not new technology either. World War II, they used glider technology to insert troops. I believe it was just prior to D-Day, right? And they had gliders that they would tow up way high and let them go. And again, insert troops. We're using it a little differently now. It's not for troop insertions, but we're thinking that glider technology could be very useful for delivering precision location resupply far into the battlefield. Because again, that glide ratio for a glider is that much better than a parachute. So then you really can get long distance. So it's very interesting, all of the aerial delivery. Next one I'll talk about is the military nutrition and food service. Unlike some of these other areas, we actually have that mission for all of the Department of Defense. We do kitchens on submarines, the design, implementation of it, food for Marines. We do Air Force, a lot of their bomber pilots are on long missions in the cockpit up to 12 hours. Well, they need a specialized food, right, to be able to eat that food at that altitude, for a 12-hour mission. We've also done a lot of work for NASA too with astronauts and how do they eat food up in space. They are by far, recognized as world leaders in any type of field, combat feeding, nutrition there. And from the combat perspective, we're really looking at how do we shrink. Most of you probably familiar with the MRE, right? The food in a pouch there, meal ready to eat. But we're looking at that. How do we really miniaturize that and get like a soldier able to carry 7 days worth of supply, in their rucksack, and we're almost there. We're still going through development, but there's a lot of science behind that too. Yeah, you can shrink food up, right, and make it very small, compact, and nutritious. But is it tasty? Is anyone going to want to eat it, right? Because you also, it has to be edible. Soldiers have to want to eat the food too. So that's a big part of what we do there at Natick, the combat feeding. I talked a little bit about the textiles. A lot of that has to do with protection too, development of body armor. We're focusing a lot more now, and some of this came from the shift in Army priorities I talked about a few years ago in camo, concealment, and signature management, decoys. Again, back to World War II. Might remember, decoys over in England, right? They had these blow-up tanks sitting over in England trying to make the enemy think we were attacking from a different direction. The Army's rethinking, relooking at whether, that should be a part of the future, and we're very involved with that. We also, contingency basing. My previous job, as I'd mentioned, PM Force Sustainment Systems, we do what we call a base camp in a box. But basically, if a unit's going to this new location with pretty much no resources, it's the power generation, the latrines, the billeting, office space, everything like 150 man soldiers would need in an austere environment. That was a big part of this directorate, working on that too. And how do we, it's called operational energy. That's a term. I think it's gonna get more attention also with this new administration. How do we reduce the energy, right, that we're using at these base camps? There's a ton of energy used. How can we integrate renewable resources, solar panels, wind technology into this stuff? How do we reuse water? How do we reduce waste? All of that work is done there. Soldier performance, that's a huge one for us, a big focus for the Army, but basically it's called physiological status monitoring, right? Very popular with these commercial watches, right? That will tell you how much sleep you got, how much energy, is your body recovering appropriately. The Army's looking very hard at how do we apply that to combat soldiers so leaders can tell, right? Kind of they have a gauge when their soldiers might be depleted on, energy, sleep, that type of stuff.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Frank, just another quick question here. Could you talk about what billeting means?
Yeah, pretty much just where soldiers sleep, so a lot of times in a tactical environment, it might just be under the stars, right? Then sometimes we might have time to set up a tent. But in Iraq and Afghanistan, with those long enduring operations, right? You don't want to, if you deploy to Iraq, you don't want to sleep in a tent for a year. So we do more what we call rigid wall shelters that the troops sleep in at night. So that's what we refer to as billeting. Yeah, they do a lot more there too. Soldier Borne Sensor is another key project. That's a small little what we call micro UAV. It's being fielded out to soldiers now, but it basically has a camera, and a platoon sergeant can, use that UAV to, do surveillance of the battlefield. So very useful, and a lot of integration. How do you integrate all this new equipment onto a soldier? It's a tough problem, and we work a lot of that there at Natick. Collective protection, again, all the body armor, all the helmet development, that is all done at Natick. The uniform I'm wearing now, developed at Natick, the new Army dress uniform, the rucksacks, again, pretty much, eyewear for protection, all of that development is done there at Natick. And then on the far right-hand side, again, that's the simulation and training work done out of Orlando. So I won't spend much time on that one. Okay, so with a name like Soldier Center, right, you better kind of have a pretty good connection to the soldier, right? You better be able to really understand what it is to be a soldier if you're going to be developing, equipment and clothing that's going on the soldier. And we really do have that. 21% of our workforce is prior military, which is very high for a Department of Defense lab, and even for our employees that aren't military, we have what we call a greening program, right? So we take them out to the field, we let them, carry a weapon, a rucksack, go on a ruck march, all that type of basic infantry tactic type stuff. And that's very popular. We get a lot of positive feedback from that. And obviously, as I mentioned, we're very tightly tied into the Army airborne community. We have a chief warrant officer here and 3 riggers. Riggers are the ones that actually prepare the parachute and the cargo for coming out of the aircraft. That's something you want to get right the first time. So they've identified a specialty just focused on that. Okay, this human research program is very unique to Natick. Really, the only program in defense that is like it. And we get human research volunteers, usually from Fort Benning, but sometimes other installations. And they're coming out of basic training. And we go down and we brief them on the program. We call it recruitment, tell them about the program. And it's all voluntary. But we find 30 to 40 soldiers that are willing to volunteer, come here to Natick for approximately 120 days as human research volunteers. And that is critical to a lot of that human performance research I talked about. And then USAREUM uses those soldiers a lot also on the medical side, right? We're more focused on the human performance, but the medical command is much more, concerned on, things such as bone density studies. I mean, they really do it all kinds of different studies, blister studies, how are soldiers going to react to certain blisters. So, but even once the soldiers get here, I know that sounds pretty terrible to volunteer for a program like that. But each study they're involved in, they get briefed again, and they get to consent whether they're involved in each of these studies. And at any given time, if for whatever reason they say, I want out, they're taken out of the study. And if they want out of the program, we'll move them on to their first duty station. So it truly is very voluntary, and we have all kinds of governance over that, internal IRB boards, and yeah, so it's it's governed pretty heavily. So fear not that we're doing unsanctioned research on soldiers at Natick. We do not do that. So. Okay, just a quick snapshot of our workforce. We used to have a saying, A to Z, anthropology all the way to zoologist, but I've been told a few years ago the zoologist retired, so we can't use that anymore. But as you can see here over on the right hand side, a very diverse background with all the different educations, and again from the mission I briefed, you can see how we need that, right? Human performance versus parachutes coming out of an airplane, completely different disciplines, right? And we need different graduates with different backgrounds to focus on that. You can also see here again, 17% doctorates, 38 masters, 41% bachelors. So, you know, it's definitely a highly educated workforce. But again, only 6% of Soldier Center is active duty military. Okay, again, another busy chart, not going to spend much time, but when Congress appropriates funds to the military, they break it down in 6-1, 6-2, 6-3, 6-4. A bit of a challenge sometimes, right? Because we got to make sure we use the funding in the appropriate basic research, right? You can't use basic research funding on advanced technology development. So that's just the way Congress kind of makes sure, you know, we're working on how they've appropriated the money. But as you can see, you know, pretty big budget there, you know, $500 million just in FY20 coming to Soldier Center. Again, that isn't the entire installation. I'm just talking Soldier Center. And a lot of those funds go, you know, out to universities, you know, UMass Lowell, Tufts, you know, or other local innovation corporations that help us develop some of these systems too. That isn't all internal funding. A lot of it goes outside to the local Massachusetts community. Okay, here's just kind of a laundry list of the unique facilities. No surprise as you look down through this, you know, really a lot of focus on protection, as we discussed. Dorio climatic chambers, that's a real interesting one. A lot of the human research work is done in that. And we basically have an Arctic chamber where we can get down as cold as you want anywhere on Earth. We can replicate it with the humidity, the rain, the temperature, the wind, solar load. I mean, you just pick a place on the Earth and it's all automated to, you know, produce that. And we have a tropic chamber too, right? That does the same thing for more a, you know, desert or jungle environment. So very, very unique capability there. A lot of our human performance work, you know, I talk more on the physical side of human performance, but we're really getting into a lot of the cognitive science of human performance applied to soldiers. And a lot of that work we do in collaborations with Tufts. We have some of our researchers actually embedded there at Tufts. They're one of the leaders in some of the cognitive sciences. Yeah, and you'll see, you know, on this slide down in the lower left, there's Tufts for the Center for Applied Brain and Cognitive Sciences, another acronym. And then left-hand side, you know, some of our industry nonprofit partners, MIT Lincoln Laboratories, great organization. We do a lot of work with them. Draper, Aerial delivery, I talked about that. They do a lot of the software for the smart parachutes, miter. Yeah, we have a lot of help, a lot of partners doing what we do there at Natick. So this is the new $50 million facility I spoke of in the beginning. And this is a long time coming. We finally got the funding for this, and construction started. Geez, I think it's been a few months. It's going up fast, though. If you drive by, you know, you can see it in the distance. It's a big 4-story building, going up real fast. But what this is for, you know, a few slides back, you know, a lot of these separate labs, this will consolidate all those labs of individual disciplines into one integrated facility. And it's really focused on squad lethality, right? It's one thing to focus on soldier performance, but this facility is large enough. Think of a big field house location, highly instrumented, cameras, all kinds of sensors in it, where we can actually have a squad go in there, do tactics, be flying a micro UAV, simulated environment, and really study the team dynamics. And there's a lot of focus from the Army on not just the human to human interactions, but how do humans interact with machines? We call it, you know, human to machine interaction. And that facility will really allow us to get after that. Very excited about that. I think it's going to be another 2 years before it's finished and fully instrumented, but we will have a big ribbon cutting ceremony for that one probably in 2023. So this is a slide that, you know, was developed just a few months ago, and I really liked it. I thought it was good for this audience, just to show you kind of how the soldier and the individual equipment has evolved over the years. You know, the first one being World War II. And all transparency, these dollar numbers are, you know, the year they were spent. So obviously 206, it's more than that. You would have to inflate those dollars from way back then to really have an apples to apples comparison. But still, the basic story of, you know, what we spent on a World War II soldier versus what we're spending on a soldier now has went up exponentially over the years, and especially, you know, really the past 10 years, it's went up. And a lot of it's, you know, comes back to technology. We're just putting a lot more technology on the soldier. We're developing, not there at Natick, but down at Aberdeen, a next generation weapon for that soldier. It highly technical, has software on it, helps aim assist technology on it, you know. So we're doing new goggles that have integrated virtual training, but could also be used in combat to help identify enemy everything. Thermal weapons. It seems like everything new that we're developing and putting on the soldier has some type of embedded software and has some type of power requirement that is creating a new problem for us, because now we got to figure out how do we power all that stuff on a soldier on the battlefield for, you know, enduring missions. So yeah, so, and you can see over on the far right hand side, you know, what is that soldier of the future going to cost? And to be quite honest, the Army really doesn't quite know at this point, right? And can the Army afford that? We're developing this, but can we afford to field that to all the soldiers across the Army? The answer is probably no, and we might need to keep some of it just focus on that close combat soldier, right? So if you're a soldier that does sustainment in the rear, you might not get all of this new best of breed equipment, but to be quite honest, you probably don't need it either. So.
Excuse me, Frank, just a quick question on this slide. Could you clarify GWOT?
GWOT, yeah, that's basically Iraq and Afghanistan, global war on terrorism.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, last slide here. Again, another very busy slide, but science and technology, research and development is great, but we need to always focus on what is transitioning out of that to the soldier, right? We got to always keep rechecking and make sure we have plenty of program reviews and planning sessions to make sure the work we're doing is relevant to be fielded to a soldier down the road. So this is just our one catch-all, over the past 10 plus years, all the things that have been successfully transitioned to a PM office. Full disclosure, that doesn't mean all of this actually got fielded onto the soldier. I mean, with science and technology, that's okay. Sometimes you're going to develop something, it's successful, but for whatever reason, the Army makes the decision not to field that. But that doesn't mean it wasn't useful, right? We learned something from that, and we transition it. But a lot of this work has been transitioned, and you could see it fielded out with soldiers. I already talked about that soldier-borne sensor that is currently being fielded to infantry soldiers as we speak. That JPAD system, that's the precision aerial delivery system I was talking about. Another system not highlighted here, but for airborne jumpers, a reserve parachute. When you jump out of a plane, you have a chute on your back, right? That is supposed to be pulled for you, or you pull it at the right time. But if that goes wrong, you have a reserve parachute on your front that you pull out if you need it. Well, sometimes for whatever reason, if the soldier's disoriented or stuff, they're not going to have the wherewithal to pull that reserve parachute. We've developed a system that has a lot of sensing technology with altitude and all of that, and will automatically deploy that reserve parachute for a jumper. And I mean, that's a big problem. We lose a few soldiers each year due to just jumps. We had one. Hopefully this is publicly releasable, I believe. But yeah, there was a fatality last week with one of the jumpers, just a training exercise. And actually our team, whenever there is a fatality from a jump like that, our team from Natick, just like the, what do you call it, NTSB, we have a team that goes down on site, does the investigation, figures out what went wrong, so we can make sure it never happens again. So that's another critical mission I forget to mention of that aerial delivery team, is doing the forensics on any type of jump where something went wrong. And also, the female body armor, we do a lot, especially recently, we focused a lot on the female soldiers and how their needs are different than a lot of our male soldiers. The body makeup, and we study all this, how it's different from males. And we are putting a lot of research and development, not just with body armor, but anything a female soldier wears and how to make it optimize for that body type. We've done a lot of work with that.
Excuse me, Frank, another quick question here. Could you clarify what is CFTs at the top there?
Yeah.
The timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. So back to that slide where I talked about the 8 Army priorities. The Army, yeah, I didn't talk about this either. The Army stood up a new 4-star command to kind of integrate all the efforts to work those 8 modernization priorities listed. And that was a big deal in itself. You know, the Army doesn't stand up a brand new 4-star command very often. I think that was the first time we had done it in decades. And it's called Army Futures Command. Unfortunately, we tried to, they were doing a lot like Amazon did. Hey, where are we going to locate our new headquarters? You know, and they had a top 10 list, and then they got down. I think Boston made it to the top 3 list. And it was Raleigh, North Carolina, Boston, and Austin, Texas. They were really looking for innovation, right? They wanted a new way of doing business, break away from DC and the bureaucracy in DC. And so they were looking at those 3 cities. Unfortunately, I think they made the wrong choice not coming here to Boston, but you know, they're located in Austin. And a subordinate of Army Futures Command are these cross-functional teams, and each one is assigned one of those 8 priorities. So they stood up a whole team to focus on soldier lethality, next generation combat vehicle. So just kind of a new organization to do business a little bit differently. You know, we have had issues with Army and defense acquisitions taking too long, being too bureaucratic, right? And, you know, work on a system for, you know, 5 years and invest all kinds of money just to get to the end and go out and do a user evaluation and get bad feedback. So we're trying to get what we call soldier touch points up front and early during the development process. That's a big part of Army Futures Command, and that's a big part of the cross-functional teams mission too, is making sure we're developing the right systems for the Army. Okay, I think that's it. I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but any time check? Wow, I ran over time. Sorry.
That's okay. Frank, this was fascinating to learn about all of the excellent work of the Natick Soldier Systems Center. So I want to thank you and give you a warm, but again, silent Zoom round of applause for your presentation. And before we turn it over to Q&A, I have a number of questions in waiting here for you, and I'm sure others have questions too. But before I do that, I will just mention that if you liked this event, please consider supporting the Natick Historical Society, which puts together programs like this one's for free for all of our community. And that's www.natickhistoricalsociety.org. And if you're looking for upcoming events, you can find those on our website too.